Gentlemen, we are in 2024 talking about the election of 1844. The last time we had a conversation, we were in 1824. What would we say has changed and what is still kind of the same from 1824 to 1844, that 20-year period?
So you had the Missouri Compromise in 1820, which was really the beginning of like a sectionalism discussion around how will slavery progress with all this new land, Louisiana Purchase. Um, Andrew Jackson kicked the mess out of everyone and destroyed all parties. And so what was left formed a new party and new parties, including the Whig Party.
Tyler is the president in 1844 before the election. He's a Whig.
He was a threat to Clay and other Whigs, even though in theory, on paper, he was a Whig, but he was a threat to them. He's outcasted from the Whig Party. He doesn't even run.
Tyler was never a Whig. Tippecanoe and Tyler too. William Henry Harrison won that election. Tyler never won an election, and he wouldn't have won one if he ran again because he was not a popular dude.
Wasn't he considered one of the worst presidents in history?
I think that's like a personal relationship with presidents. I mean, he's by default. I think Harrison dies of pneumonia like 3 weeks into his presidency.
Yep.
And then Tyler has to assume, the Oval Office, and nobody likes dude. But this is an era where you build tickets on geography. So you have William Henry Harrison, the 1812 war hero, and Tyler, I think, is a Virginian and a massive slave owner, sectionalist, 10th Amendment guy. He's not a Whig. Like the Whigs are Northeastern. He's not a Whig.
Yeah, that kind of goes to show why you pick a VP.
And Tyler, you're right. His whole cabinet resigns. He hates Clay, and like the majority of Whigs and him just don't get along. He's a sectionalist.
We're going into the election of 1844. Tyler's the president, but no one wants him to remain the president. The Whig Party is going to have their national convention, and they are not going to endorse the sitting president. And essentially, he gets ousted from the party. How often and how rare and how wild does a circumstance have to be for the sitting president to not get the endorsement?
Funny.
Obviously, I think I'm laughing at what Tim's laughing at. And I think of Andrew Johnson, secondly, one of the worst fucking presidents ever. They paid that dude to go away or impeach him.
The Whig National Convention. This will be the third time Clay gets nominated. And I do believe that the first time he ran under a Democratic Republican ticket in 1824, then a Republican ticket in 1832, and then in 1844, now he is a Whig. The word Whig, now, that gives a very aristocratic vibe. Do people note the irony of that? Or was that like, oh, they were like, oh no, let's bring it back to the good old days when everyone wore powder wigs and shit.
Henry Clay is the greatest politician to never be president, and he kind of was right there in this election, the great compromiser, as he's known. The Whig Party was a total concoction to try to battle Andrew Jackson's popularity and dominance. I mean, obviously, he passed it off to Van Buren. Van Buren was no Jackson, and so it got intriguing in that era. But the Whigs are, stop drinking, go to church, pay your taxes.
That all might be good advice too, but it's like lame.
I mean, the Whigs had a platform, and they had support. They did, but they were a reactionary party. So in the end, that's why they went away.
The other political party is the Democratic Party. They have their national convention, and it seems like in the beginning that Martin Van Buren is going to be the candidate who they're going to take up and they're going to get behind. Does it seem that way?
Yeah, the little wizard, Martin Van Buren, New Yorker, Hudson Valley cat, completely changed the game, and a horrible president. So yeah, I mean, going in, it looks like he should be the candidate, but Southern Democrats do not like that dude. And the issue there is really Texas. That's where they split.
What's going on at the time? We've got, the Texas annexation, getting Mexico, slavery, all these things are really starting to pop. So things are starting to heat up, right?
Clay, again, a fantastic candidate. Martin Van Buren and Clay actually team up to oppose Texas annexation, which is a Democrat and a Whig. I think Tyler proposed it on his way out, and Calhoun, Secretary of State, backed it. But Tyler brought that whole Texas question into the 1844 election, and that's what caused some disarray in all parties. But like you said, man, the Napoleon of the Stump is one of my top 5 presidents ever. Because
Best one-term president.
Yeah, he a mic drop president.
Oh yeah. I like the idea of how rowdy conventions could get when you get a dark horse candidate. Like, everyone just assume it's going to kind of be straight down an arrow, and then someone just starts popping shit on the other side of the room, like, why does England have part of Oregon? What the hell is going? Why don't we just take all that? And then Van Buren's trying to like kind of politic. That's like a certain type of politics, right? The convention politics. That's when you have to politic the politicians. That's when you have to smooth over the smooths. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Polk's chosen from the convention. He's going to run against Clay and Bernie, who's a breakaway from the Whigs. And I mean, the issues are interesting. Like Tim said, it's Texas, it's manifest destiny, it's tariffs, it's the fact that Andrew Jackson put all our money in banks that his friends own.
Exactly. James Polk had the nickname Little Hickory. Anyone want to answer, like, why is he even, where did he come up with that name from?
He was given it by Andrew Jackson. James K. Polk was born in Mecklenburg, North Carolina, not far from where Jackson was born. They both moved to Tennessee. He was a friend of Jackson. Jackson used Van Buren, but he was closer with Polk ultimately. So he's Little Hickory because he's Andrew Jackson's.
He's his boy.
Yeah, he's his protege.
Exactly.
He also comes in with the same energy. Like, all these guys are trying to politic around Jackson, and Jackson's going to take all that politicking and just use it as fuel. And I feel like that's kind of the same thing that happened at this convention. Is Martin Van Buren is trying to politic around the ideas of all these complicated issues of annexing Texas, Mexico and England actually own these territories, and pushing slavery, and how does that all going to look? And then you have the guy on the other side of the room like, to hell with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think where they kind of differ, Jackson and Polk, is Polk was, educated, highly successful within educational circles at a young age. I think the oldest of 10 kids, his pops moved him to Tennessee. But they had some dough. Like, his dad was successful. Jackson struggled a little more, I would say. But Polk, he identifies with Polk for whatever reason, but Polk's definitely richer, more successful. It's got a lot of assets.
So, to get the take on a very important thing in terms of picking your leader would be who would win in a fight one-on-one. So we're going to call it. I got some interesting stats for you guys. I want to know your take. Who's going to win in this fist fight between Polk and Clay? Couple things is Polk is 5'8", Clay is 6 feet. All right, so he's got him by 4 inches. Polk is 160 pounds, and Clay is 180. Now, Polk is 49 years old. Clay is 63. So Clay's much bigger, but he is older.
That's
right?
ageism. That's ageism.
Hold on. Polk's smaller though. Oh yeah. And just as an extra tick in there, Polk is going to die in 4 years after the election.
Oh.
And Clay's going to die in 7. So this is where they're at in terms of their life as a whole.
You ruined the story. I'm
Sorry,
kidding.
man. I don't mean to break your heart.
It's all right. I think Clay. I'm taking Clay only because I'd be pissed and frustrated as fuck if I lost 3 times for the presidency. I'm the great compromiser. I've been in every situation that progressed America in the 19th century, and I can't hold the White House, and this cat can come from nowhere.
Right.
The slogan that Clay used against Polk was, "Who is James K. Polk?" That was the slogan. So yeah, I'm kicking his ass if I'm
Yeah,
Clay.
I'm with you on that. That's who I predict.
So I'm gonna argue with both of you guys because Polk's slogan was 54 and 40 or fight. That dude was about it. And Clay was the great compromiser. And he's a notorious
Okay.
loser.
You acting like Polk was gonna go out there and fight himself. I'm guessing he wasn't.
Exactly.
I do think if someone that much bigger catches you in the jaw one time, depending on your chin level, you just drop.
And not to go too far in the weeds, but Polk had intestinal surgery when he was mad young. That boy almost died. So that's probably why he died at 53.
Agreed. So I also that was part of the equation too in thought process is I jotted down that he had stomach issues, but Clay had strong respiratory illness. So he had possible tuberculosis is what I was checking out.
Hmm.
So that, but again, the longer the fight goes, the less in favor it is for Clay. If Clay can punch him real early in the fight or get a hold of him because he's bigger.
Are you talking about age again? There's some 63-year-olds that will kick your ass.
That is
Oh,
true.
yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
100%. Some 2024 63-year-olds.
Oh, okay. So the 1844s wouldn't.
Actually, they probably whoop my ass harder, bro. Quite
I
frankly.
think I mean, they were tough guns back in those days. That was tough living.
Well, you got to
Yeah.
be, and there's the fairness of you got to be tough to live this long. And though they only lived the same, roughly within a few years, the same amount of time afterwards, Polk made it to, 54 and Clay made it to 70. So in terms of that
53.
general health, yeah, what's that? He was 53.
He was 53.
See, so
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Clay does, I think Polk died like, man, I just killed that shit. I think Clay died like, what if?
you just ruined the story.
Not you ruined it
No,
first.
no. That's great though, and that's sad. When we talk about the election issues, Western expansion, and a lot of the complications in terms of slavery and everything else that came with Western expansion, what's the take? What's the ground? What's it like on the ground?
Part of the expansion was because over in Europe, cotton was in high demand. And so they wanted to expand further west to enable to, succumb to that and able to support the growth that is needed and understand the mass amount of money that could be made because of the high demand. So I think that was one thing on the minds of people. Money.
I agree with Tim. Polk is a slave owner. He owns a number of slaves in 2 states, Tennessee being one of them, where 50% of slaves don't live to 21 years old in 1844.
Wow.
When you get as far west as Texas, which becomes, I think, the second or third largest slave state by the Civil War, cotton grows great in Texas, Oklahoma.
Right.
And so you're right. There's a zeal on the part of the Southerners to get south or get west and grow cotton. I think Van Buren's trying to curtail that.
Right.
But Polk, slave owner, expansionist, talented politician, sees opportunity. He calls it. He calls his own shot. Four objectives: lower the tariffs,
Right.
get the Oregon, Washington territory, settle the Texas issue, and figure out the federal financial identity. I mean, he calls what he's going to do. Yeah.
Kobe.
Basically, I mean, he'll always be in my top 5. I think he's probably a deplorable human being on some levels in terms of his slavery, but an incredibly successful president. Historians will argue New York State settled this election. 36 electoral votes. 500,000 people voted in New York State in 1844, and the margin was 5,106.
Wow.
And
So-
Bernie
Yep.
got 15,814 votes.
Wow.
A lot of historians will tell you Clay should have been in the White House. Polk gets in because Bernie kind of interferes in that election.
I would say the same thing for like a Ross Perot with Bob Dole versus Clinton.
Yeah, agreed.
They tally up all the results, and the new president of the United States, James K. Polk.
Hey.
Napoleon of the Stump.
Oh yeah, and Henry Clay becomes a notorious three-time loser.
Loser.
Good thing he didn't
William-
fist fight Polk. He'd have been a four-time loser.
Buffalo Bills presidential candidates.
Hey,
Yeah.
what can I say, man?
Tim, no offense, bro.
That's okay. Still love my Bills. Go Bills. Let's
too, man.
let's talk about the electoral votes and how many votes and all that stuff for the popular vote, because Polk having 170 where Clay had 105, but this was at that point up in history. At that moment was the closest election in history. Very, very, very close. Why do you feel that it was so close?
Honestly, to be proverbial, there's a divide in the country. It
Right.
involves expansionism, sectionalism, 54 or 40 or fight. Love that. Just trying to punk out the British to sign something. It worked. I mean, that's where you got to give Polk credit. He initiates a needless war with Mexico in 1840 or 1846 for
Yep.
no reason other than to take a third of Mexico. But that actually increases the angst around the slavery issue. The more territories you bring in, the more you're going to have to keep the Senate equal and figure this shit out. When the Texas issue came up originally, when Calhoun brought it up, he wanted to separate Texas into two pieces. One slavery, one anti-slavery. And so as you see all these territories pour in this era, that's why the 1850 Compromise is coming, because there's an issue. That's where Bernie comes from. Like, he's saying no more slavery. And enough people are voting on that idea at that point that it impacted that election. Yeah, I said he punked England. He punked everybody. I mean, he completely did. And he founded the Independent Treasury. That was Martin Van Buren's idea, but it was Polk who really put it in place, which gave like competency and independence to the federal government's budget. Really, really important, because those pet banks and wildcat banks that were holding federal money were so volatile. And it was a controversial idea, but that independent treasury is important. It is. And he lowers tariffs. There was a tariff war going on throughout that era. I mean, he was big on that. That's kind of how Zachary Taylor, I think, who comes next, runs off tariff issues. Yep. Cali comes in at that point, Arizona, Nevada. I mean, the whole United States shape changes because of Polk. I mean, close your eyes and think of what the United States would look like without, the entire Southwest and Oregon and Washington.